And welcome to Kelly and Wrighty. No Wrighty today. He's been in New Zealand for the Women's World Cup draw. But Benty, you will be equally worried that Man City are closing in on Arsenal.
Yep, the draw at Southampton means the Gunners are only 2 points clear at the top. But we're still top.
They are still top. And today we'll also be talking about another side with big dreams. Eddie Howe believes that Newcastle can achieve special things after moving into the Champions League spot. Is top four a realistic target?
Stevie who? Gerrard was sacked last week and now my old club are scoring for fun. But have the players let him down?
And we'll also ask if Jurgen Klopp is at his lowest point after losing to bottom of the table Nottingham Forest. This weekend was nothing if not eventful. Pretty much everything that you thought about the Premier League before this weekend has now been turned on its head. It was a real weekend of surprises and of big celebrations as well. Look, the celebration, the fun police are out again. We just want to reiterate, this is not a place for that. Life is rubbish. You should celebrate. Look at Casemiro when he got the equaliser for Manchester United.
That is what you call passion.
Yeah.
The energy. I mean, great. I thought Manchester United deserved the point. But what a header that is, by the way. And it's just, he's a holding midfield player. Doesn't score many goals. But look at that. Look how much it means to himself, to the supporters. I mean, I love to see that situation. It doesn't really matter if it's a winning goal in or the equalising goal. It doesn't matter what circumstances it's in. You should be able to celebrate however you like. And I think in that image there, look at all the players, all there with him. I mean, look how a serial winner is doing that. I mean, I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that's the point, is everything that he's achieved in his career, and yet that one goal to equalise against Chelsea it means that much to him. So we're all for the celebrations here, as are Tim Sherwood and Darren Lewis, who also join us in the studio. It's been just the most extraordinary weekend. I don't think we could have predicted half of what's gone on.
Is it just not the Premier League? It's just so unpredictable. You know, when you likes of Liverpool, Nottingham Forest roll in and bottom of the league, get a result like that, it's just incredible what this league throws up. You know, there's teams fighting for their lives, you know, and everyone's got something to fight for, haven't they? In the Premier League, you know, whether it's the top, whether it's top four, whether it's relegation. And that's what keeps us watching it. I mean, it's just fantastic. Yeah,
the relegation battle is going to be one of the most difficult things to predict because suddenly teams just turn their fortunes around. But what's also going to be really interesting is who finishes in the top four, because Newcastle are now up to fourth place in the table. And it was a comprehensive win, a comprehensive and definitive performance from them.
Yeah, I thought they played really well. Every single one of them. I thought Eddie Howe got his tactics spot on. Callum Wilson, we've said it before, if he can stay fit, I mean, he is the difference maker. Put performances together, they patterns of play, defended really well. Rode their luck a little bit in the first half. Son maybe should have done better with one or two of his chances, but I think a lot of people are now looking at this Newcastle side and thinking it was almost like, where can they finish? Maybe top 8, top 6 would be good. There's no reason why they can't go one step further. I think Eddie Howe's been really shrewd in the transfer market, bought good players with the right mentality as well. He's not just gone for superstar names. So I think all of a sudden this performance against Spurs, who hadn't been beaten away from home I think since April, I think that was the real standout performance, and people went, okay, Newcastle are the real deal.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about what it means for Tottenham a bit later on, but from a Newcastle point of view, they do have these performances in them. Is it about getting them consistently?
Absolutely, that's key. You know, if you want to win anything, you need to be consistent. I think it's really disrespectful. Some comments have been made over the last few weeks about Eddie Howe and about spending. I think he actually improves some of the players that they've already had. Joe Linton, for instance, is the biggest example. You know, someone who's a fouled number 9 with previous managers, all of a sudden playing as number 8 central midfield and running the game. You know, Ramirez is obviously one of his signings, but I think he's been astute in the market. He's not wasted any money. And he's improved the players they already had. So I think it's a little bit disrespectful to suggest that it's just about the money, because they've spent nothing. I mean, just hold your breath and wait what's going to come.
Yeah, I mean, they did in the last transfer window spend more than any other side in Europe, any of the big teams in Europe.
Yeah, but they needed to, because they just come, you know, they needed to, because they're struggling in relegation. I think for Jurgen Klopp to come out and start criticising them, I think it's
But is there not a difference between acknowledging that they spent a lot of money and criticising them for spending a lot of money? There's a difference, isn't there?
That's what he meant, really, wasn't he? He said, well, we're not spending the money and other teams are, so I just suggest he gets on with his own team, because he's got a lot of problems there at Liverpool.
And we will come to that very shortly. Look, for Newcastle, though, all is rosy in the garden, and one of the players who's got a new lease of life is is Miguel Almiron, who it seemed was kind of a bit of a lost soul at Newcastle. Rejuvenated now.
Yeah, I wonder if you had a look at Jack Grealish's tweet about him.
Yeah.
He said it, didn't he?
He's looking at his stats.
Well, he now has better stats than Grealish, which is quite interesting. And he is an example of the players that have been improved by Eddie Howe. He has a real confidence when he gets into the final third. He does take his chances exceptionally well. And he leads with his performances. He inspires other players around him with his performances. I look at Newcastle, the one thing that fascinates me about them in general, personally, if I was Newcastle, I would own it. When Amanda Staveley took over, she was very triumphant, and that's where all of the optimism around the club came from, because Amanda Staveley said, we will go out and compete for the biggest players, the best players. And I think it is true to say that there are lots of clubs that have had a lot of money but have not been able to build a defensive structure. I think what they've done at Newcastle has been really, really clever with their recruitment. They've brought in good players, not celebrated players, but good players. And they've really built a firm foundation, unlike Everton when they had the money, unlike Fulham.
Manchester
exactly.
United,
exactly. When the new money's coming, they've all celebrated on offensive players and not really built the foundations of the house, whereas Newcastle have done the opposite. But it is also true to say that Trippier doesn't come if they haven't got the money, and Isak doesn't come if they haven't got the money. So I think it's almost half and half, But I definitely do think that Joe Linton is a really good example of a player that Eddie Howe has improved considerably, because lots of people felt he had to be sold, and Benitez didn't stay because he wanted a striker, and they offered him Joe Linton, and he's like, this is a £40 million player who doesn't produce £40 million performances.
Which he didn't as a striker.
Which he didn't, absolutely, 100%. And this is the reason why I think Newcastle are in great shape. And yeah, Eddie Howe's done superbly well to mould together the sum of the parts.
It is a moulding of the sum of the parts, and as much as you can look at Almiron, you can look at maybe Callum Wilson's goals and the importance of keeping him fit. There is, as the guys have been saying, a collective there, and a sense of knowing what's going to happen. There's a pattern to their play.
Yeah, I mean, as Daz was saying there, it's about the foundations, and as you said, Callum Wilson, if he can stay fit, he's 15 to 20 goals every single season. I think he's got the lot. Defensively solid. Even someone like Dan Burn, again, who they brought in, good player for Brighton. A lot of people looked at it and thought, okay, is he what they need at the time? He's playing left back now. He's fitting in perfectly. I think as a team, as you said there, they're so hard to play against. They work incredibly hard. They're playing for the manager, and I think more importantly, they all know their roles. Even someone like Bruno Guimaraes, who's the superstar signing of the team, he's doing the ugly side of the work. And you watch him against Spurs, he's flying around, he's putting his tackles in. When he's getting the ball, he's calm, he's composed, he's running the game for Newcastle. And I think a lot of credit goes down to Eddie Howe, because I think he's managed him really well. When you hear Eddie Howe speak, I think he speaks really well. He talks about his players. He's never too high if they win a game. He's never too low. He's always level-headed. And I think he knows exactly where this Newcastle team can go. And even when he should own it. Listen, the money will never go away. So the best thing to do in that situation is just own it and say, yes, we do have a lot of money. We do have an increased profile. There will be a spotlight on us. There is no point pretending and saying it's not about the vast sums of money we're buying for player, because the profile of the club has gone through the roof. I think he said that the weekend as well when someone asked him about the money. He said, unfortunately, we've got the money. The whole world knows we've got the money. But not unfortunately. I don't think he's quite happy with people trying to kind of detract away from the performance against Tottenham. It's almost like, well, you should play that way because you've got the money. And he's working his hardest to kind of say, well, that's not the case. Like, we've got the money, but look at what we're doing with it. We're playing well, and we deserve all the applause we get. Everybody knows that the secret, and you both know this. You've played in great teams, and and Harry Redknapp always used to say the secret is great players, and you don't attract great players to your club unless you've got money, or you are incredibly good at recruitment, finding their gems, polishing them up, getting them to a position where they can perform on a big stage. And even then, the food chain dictates that someone else takes that player away from you. Newcastle are not in that position at the moment because they have that finance.
But them players who look like, some of them, Almiron looks like a superstar, and the previous managers look like someone you'd want out of your club as quickly as possible if you could get your money back. That's why I think you have to give Eddie all the credit. I think the the way they're playing now, the philosophy of how he's put them together, the energy and desire and the commitment of the group, not just individual players. It used to be Sam Maximan. Now he ain't played for ages. No one's talking about him anymore. He will come back, and if he wants to be part of a team group, then he's going to be valuable to him. But it's not just about the individual. You can't win anything with just one individual. You need a group to be buying.
Did you see that moment at the end of the game yesterday where they all got together and they were hugging each other, and that kind of struck me quite a lot, because they are, Guimaraes is a superstar player. Lots of people think he could do even bigger than Newcastle. But at the end of the game, he was right in there. His baby was born last week. He wanted to be back there. That's a really good team spirit.
Even the recruitment again. Nick Pope, would even mention him. I mean, the save he made yesterday from Harry Kane. He's made important saves at important times. So again, that comes down to Eddie Howe, because a few teams are in for him, but he felt like he was the right goalkeeper to take this club forward. And I think, again, he could be one of their major signings this season as well.
And one side note on Bruno is that he could have been forgiven for being a bit distracted at the weekend, because his wife, I think it is his wife rather than his partner, gave birth to a baby. Gorgeous. And he put on Instagram, "This is for you guys." And I couldn't make head nor tail of this, because I thought he meant his wife and child. He didn't. He meant the Newcastle fans. And they went 2 days without sleep, could be at home, but I always wanted to be here with you. By which he meant the Newcastle supporters. Thanks for the support, and a kiss from Mateo, who's the baby, to you. He is a Brazilian Geordie, and then there's a very, very sweet picture of the new baby. But look, you can the link between Bruno and the fans is clearly a really strong one. I mean, his wife may be having words with him after the phrasing of that. Would you not rather have been with us? But look, it's important to him. And Natalie Guedra, the Brazilian journalist who speaks to a lot of the Brazilian players who are here and has quite good links with them, said he can't believe how much the crowd have taken to him. And as he improved in his performances, they feed into his confidence, which grows, and then his performances grow.
Yeah, it's a slow burner as well for Bruno. He didn't play for the first 2 months because it wasn't the right time to put him in. Eddie had him on the bench. He was kept drifting him into the game, and he's letting him have a look at the situation. John J. Shelby was playing in front of him. Another player who's picked up knocks as well. So he had to get used to the English football. We know a lot of them do. He never threw him in at the deep end to foul. He's put him in when it was right to put him in. They love a hero up there, and he certainly delivers. I mean, he's got the ability, he's got the passion. Benty talked about his work rate. He's getting back in, he's running back. Yesterday, that game was a team knew what they were doing against a group of individuals who are playing for two superstars, which is Son and Kane, and hoping that they do something rather than as a team with a playing philosophy trying to open up the opposition. That was Newcastle, and Tottenham, unfortunately, at the moment are just reliant on Son and Kane. You played and managed Tottenham, and you're a midfielder. You know all about the demands of what Guimaraes has to do. Which team is benefiting most from their midfielders at the moment? What, in Newcastle? Out of Tottenham and Newcastle. Oh, Newcastle. And which team do you think will finish higher? Newcastle, because they have a battle. They have a lovely balance. They've got a nice mixture of their midfield. I believe that the manager asks them to do something what they like doing, they're capable of doing, rather than ask them to do the job what the manager wants them to do. I think that Bentancur, for instance, has got a lot more than what he's being asked to do. He's being very restricted. Højbjerg wasn't playing yesterday. Oliver Skip comes in there. Bussinger is in there as well. I just think that they need to just let them do what they're good at. And I think Eddie Howe gives them that. So obviously, to answer your question, Newcastle get a lot more out of their midfield players than Tottenham are at the moment. But Tottenham are not doing that bad. Who finishes higher? Who finishes higher is about the consistency. At the moment, you would have to say you would want a season ticket at Newcastle. That's not answering your question.
But it's true.
I think Harry Kane helps you finish higher up the league.
But it's true to say that even in third and fourth place in the table, with 11, 12 games gone, depending on how many games teams have played, obviously, but 11 or 12 games gone, there is a level of inconsistency about both Newcastle and Tottenham. And if you look at Tottenham sitting in third place, but you look at the games that they've played, the opposition that they've faced so far, what have we kind of learnt about this side that there was so much expectation of at the start of the season?
The inconsistency, Kels, only comes last two games, you would have to say. They've done brilliantly up to there. They've lost when they played Chelsea.
I think the performances were consistent.
I think they were consistently average, the performances, but the results were consistently good. I think when you look at the teams who they should beat, I think they beat the teams they should beat. When you go up against Chelsea away and they get the draw at the death, at 96th minute, they got lucky in that game. They go away to West Ham and they draw that game, not able to win. Then there's the big North London derby and they got a footballing lesson in that game. You know, they're the games they need to start picking up points in. Go to Old Trafford, get outplayed again, and then go back home to where their form has been excellent, and get beaten by Newcastle. So you'd have to say at the moment the next Premier League game is going to be a huge one for Tottenham because they need to bounce back. I believe Antonio Conte has got the passion, the drive and the commitment to the club that the club needed, but I do think they need to sort out his contract issue. You know, he's talking about it's the project, we need patience, we need time, we need money. You know, all of this is not good noise coming out of there, because the reason it's not good noise because he's only got a contract to the end of the season. Now, if you want to go through with a project, you need to extend your contract. You need to extend your contract, and then perhaps Kane and Son will commit their futures to the club, and then the owner, if I'm the owner at the moment, I'm not letting him spend any more money until he commits himself to the club, because you could end up buying players for another manager who comes in with a different ideas. So it's a crossroads period at the moment for Tottenham. Yeah. I believe he is good. I believe he does win. Obviously, that's fact. Yeah. Wherever he goes, he wins. Wherever he goes, does he entertain? Of course he doesn't. But there's nothing wrong with that if your club doesn't demand that. Obviously, they've given him a job. They know what he's all about. So the demands haven't been to entertain our fans. It's about, can you win? And at the moment, there's no conclusion because there's still a lot to play for.
Even if his sides haven't been sort of tick-a-tacker type footballing sides, they've been entertaining in terms of energy and in terms of getting the ball forward.
Not his team.
Yeah, but
he entertains me watching him.
Yeah, but at Juventus there was a lot more energy in the sides than we're seeing from Tottenham. There is a suggestion that's being put around that Antonio Conte is trying to manage the team ahead of the World Cup. He's trying to kind of keep them. He's trying to not overload them before they go off to a World Cup and then come back to a second half of the season in which a lot of football is going to be played. That makes sense at the beginning of the season when the performances maybe aren't there, but the results are. Once the results start to go, is that quite a risky strategy, if that is his strategy?
Yeah, well, we saw it with Jose, didn't we, at Tottenham? You know, he was very pragmatic when he first came in. He was getting results, ended up top of the league. People started getting excited about it, then the results started to drop away, and then the fans turned on him. Listen, Conte will be no different. Will be no different there. It's fine. As long as you win, everything's correct as a manager. When I was there was always a demand on how the team played. I remember our results were going well for a very good period. We had 3 wins on the spin, and I remember the sporting director asked me to have a chat with him and the chairman, Daniel Levy, and Daniel asked me, you know, why the team wasn't playing attractive football. Now, I couldn't believe he was actually asking me. Now, one thing I will not believe is that he's asking Antonio Conte that, because I think he knows the answer. It'd be 2 words and last one will be on. So, no, at the moment, I would say Antonio Conte has got the reign to do whatever he wants. He's earned that right there. The fans are excited by him, but they will not get excited because if they start losing games, they're back-to-back losses there. They lose the next one, then they all go very sour very, very quickly, and the manager will end up leaving the football club. I just think this contract thing is huge. I think he needs to commit his future to the club, and then the chairman and the recruitment can give him the tools to work with in the next transfer window. And
that's why the contract situation, as you said, as regards the transfer window is so important, because it's not a club where there is a philosophy about buying players, if you like. There isn't a kind of overarching. It's on the manager. He is the one who's in charge. He's the one who sets the team up, the one who chooses the players that come in. And that's why it makes it so important that they know what's going to be coming after the end of the season. Because as Tim said, otherwise it's not, for example, a Southampton or a Brentford where the players that come in are picked to a pattern. At Tottenham, it's what the manager wants.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite instructive listening to Tim and Darren talking, because they've been in positions where you have to think, well, what's the manager going to do? Do I want to play for the next one if he were to go? You know, what direction are they going to go in? So they understand the uncertainty that exists in a dressing room far more than I would. It's quite fascinating that as far as Conte is concerned, there's a view that he's leveraging the interest from Juventus against Spurs to say, look, this is what I want, this is what I want. So against that, Spurs know that if they let a guy go who is a winner, proven winner, then can they ever claim to be ambitious ever again? So they've got to give him what he wants.
But they let Jose go, didn't they?
Well, they did, but I think Jose was the other side of... it's not particularly polite to say it, but I think he was on a downwards path, whereas I think as far as Antonio Conte is concerned, he's still hungry, still hot. He's won the league in each of the 3 clubs he's been at. He's overcome huge deficits to do that. With Juventus, it was in the first season, Chelsea first season, Inter Milan, it was the second season. And he's won FA Cups as well and other domestic cups. I think as far as Conte is concerned, he's won more on his own than Spurs have won in the last 30 years of the Premier League. I just think as far as he's concerned, you're right, he's got to commit. If he commits, other players commit. Kane commits. The likes of Bastoni will leave Inter Milan. I know he likes Bastoni, the huge, commanding, imposing central defender, adds the leadership he so desperately needs at the heart of that central defence. You also need a creative midfielder as well. These players come if they know you're going to stay. But obviously, as far as Spurs are concerned, they've got to persuade him to stay, and to do that, they've got to give him the finance. I think they will. I think he'll stay.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what everything sort of hangs in the balance of what happens after the World Cup. Who comes back? Who's fit? Who's going to be available? Are there going to be any managerial changes elsewhere? Are players going to move in the January transfer window after they've all been away and talking during the World Cup? There are so many unknown quantities. What we do know at the moment, though, is Tottenham find themselves in 3rd place. Newcastle are in 4th. But talking about unpredictable sides, Liverpool beaten by bottom of the table Nottingham Forest at the weekend in the first game of the weekend. Is this Klopp's lowest point at Anfield? 3 defeats away from home. They haven't won away from home all season, Liverpool. They've lost more games than they did in the whole of last season. Darren, how many things are going wrong for them?
Everything. You'd have to say right now, the biggest thing, inconsistent. As you said it there, put an unbelievable performance in against the champions, and then they go to the team that's at the bottom of the table, and they can't string 2 passes together. Jurgen Klopp, he's trying. You've seen him try different tactics. Obviously, injuries have not helped in the attacking options, but they just can't seem to get it right. The middle of the park, they're off it. There's no real intensity there. They don't really get after anybody. I think the drop off in Salah's form as well. The balance of the front 3, that's off. You saw him at the weekend play down the middle. He doesn't want to play there. He's wasted down the middle. Obviously, Diaz has been out. People don't like to hear it, but Mane's no longer there. So the balance of that front 3 again, that's off. Virgil van Dijk's having that little bit of his standards are not quite where they were, and they're getting punished every single time. So at the minute, he's got to find a way of getting this team playing. But first and foremost, they need to find consistency. But what might help them this season is that I think the whole league's inconsistent. Other than Arsenal at the minute, you'd have to say the whole league's inconsistent. So they might find themselves on this horrendous run, but they string 2 wins together. They're on the verge of top 4 again. So it's not all doom and gloom, but we're not used to seeing this from the Liverpool side.
The problem they've got, Darren, in my opinion, is that they've won the league. They've been there. Yeah. Won the Champions League. Always gone deep in that competition. Always challenged Man City. It's almost, we're early in the season, but it's gone. Yeah. It's gone. They're not going to win the Premier League this year. The motivation and the drive of these players, it's about what can we go for? What can we fight for? Do we want to fight for top 4? Now, the club would say, well, we take what's on offer, lowest hanging fruit. If that is it, if it's Champions League, we cannot be out of the Champions League. But as a player, you know, when you fought for the title and you're going right to the end, right to the wire, and all of a sudden that's taken away from you so early. And I know there's a lot of points to be played for, but I mean, they're not stupid, these players, and nor are the fans, and certainly not as Jurgen Klopp. He's looking at the league and he's looking at City and how they're playing. If it was Tottenham up there or Arsenal who haven't done it, you would think, well, we can fight this, but they brought in Haaland as well on top of everything, and it's almost like rubbing salt in the wounds. I think it's very difficult for them. I don't think, it's going to be a statement, I don't think Jurgen Klopp's there next season. I think there's a conversation to be had. I'm not sure Jurgen picks them up from where they are now and makes some challenges again. I really don't, unless possibly they win the Champions League, which they're capable of.
Why do you think he couldn't pick them up?
Well, history says that he doesn't do that. I mean, he's very good and he drives and he takes the teams to where he thinks he can get the most out of them. There's not really a drop-off. If this is consistent where we think they might drop off to outside of the top 4, it's going to be a fight to get in there at the moment. I think they still might do it. They're capable. They've got the players to. He keeps talking about the injuries, what they've got. Everyone has injuries, Jurgen. You know, stop looking for excuses. You play Nottingham Forest at the bottom of the league. You should beat them with your B team. You know, you lost a lot of games where you should have won the games. Fulham, for instance, you draw. You know, you got to beat these sort of teams. No matter what the injuries, if you're playing against the Man Cities and you've got a few injuries, then an excuse. They've got a brilliant result, as Darren said, against them. Easy to pick yourself up when you're playing Man City. When you go again and you've got to pick yourself up to go and play a team who's been promoted to the league, everyone's beating. Difficult to motivate yourself when you're not going for the title. They're not going for the title. But someone has to get into their head. It's important this club is in the Champions League next year, because otherwise they'll find themselves out of it, and then it's a rebuild, a total rebuild.
The only thing to say is that in lockdown season, when they only just made it into the top four with like 2 games or 1 game to go, I think, till the end of the season, the next season they came back and they finished just behind Manchester City, got to a Champions League final. There was a step up then. Obviously that coincides with fans coming back into the ground and how much they can kind of draw on that energy. But does it feel as though this is the end of a cycle, or is it, as Tim's saying, which they can't come back from under Klopp, or is it a period of renewal, rejuvenation?
I think you're both right. I think it does feel like the end of a cycle. I more think in relation to some of the players rather than Klopp. I think Liverpool would be absolutely crazy to get rid of Klopp.
I don't think they get rid of him. I put that straight. I think there'll be a conversation had to say, perhaps you've taken us as far as you can, and Jurgen might say the same to them and go for a new challenge. It's just my hunch. When I look at him at the moment, I just feel like that's going to be. I'm not suggesting they're sacking. No, sure. They'd be mad. You'll be right.
Didn't the Liverpool board say that they were surprised because he extended his contract, didn't he? And they said they were surprised. They were planning for him to go at the end of this season. Was that, or was it the end of next season? His contract was up. The end of next season.
Probably when Stevie Gerrard's ready. That's gone a bit wonky.
But I think, as far as Klopp is concerned, there are so many things he's changed about Liverpool, away from the pitch, the mentality, the ethos, the standing, the way that they're perceived from outside the club and around the Premier League and around Europe. They're a superpower again. And I just think if you lose him, you lose all of those things. You might bring another manager in who can do the job, but can you get another manager in who can connect with the club and the community that surrounds it, and the passion and so many very, very intricate things that he has managed to connect with during his time at the club. But for me, I think that some of the players at the club have reached the end of the line. There are players who are injured, who are always injured, and I wonder if a decision needs to be made, not just about them, but in terms of the recruitment. You know, do we now have to look at players whose injury records are better?
But again, that's something that's put on Klopp and his staff, is that there are lots of soft tissue injuries. There are lots of injuries that could be put down to overplaying. There's a lot made of the fact of how much they ran, how much they were put through in pre-season. When you look at the Liverpool players who were out, I mean, obviously you can't do anything about an ear infection. You can't do anything about a bad challenge that comes in. That's certainly not got anything to do with your preparation. But
Keita's been injured a lot. Matip has been injured a lot. Thiago arrived with a really bad injury record. And Bayern don't let top players go if they can help it. You only have to look at the fight they had to eventually allow Lewandowski to be prized from their grasp, and it goes to Barcelona and scores goal for fun. Darwin Núñez should be stupidity after he got sent off against Crystal Palace, because he could have gone on a run that would have really seen him be able to kind of score the goals to help them out of this difficult situation. But I think you're right. I think that there has to be a review of all of these things at the end of the season, because it's a cycle that one of the parties has come to the end to. I don't think it's necessarily Klopp. I think it's the players. But I hear what you're saying. Listen, just one more point. I remember when people were saying about Pep, that he doesn't stay at clubs for very long, and when they were going through a difficult time around this period last season, I think they got smashed up by Leicester at home.
4-2 at Etihad,
yeah, 5-2, and people said, has he come to the end of the road, and can he do it without a striker, and all of these things, and he did. 96 goals he scored, and they won the title, by a street, and then they regenerated and added Haaland. Sorry.
Don't let the truth get in the way.
Exactly.
I think January at the end of the season will be important for Klopp and his recruitment, because as you're saying there with the injuries, I think they need to.
It's still annoying him, isn't it? It's still annoying him.
But the point is
the same.
The same. That as far as City are concerned, you could look at City, you can look at Liverpool, and you can see two clubs that need the guys who are in control, because their profile's gone up, the calibre of player they're attracting has gone up, the intensity of the two teams. I don't think anyone else brings that same intensity to Liverpool that Klopp does.
Two things, what you're saying. Jurgen Klopp, I'm not sure he looks at his team or squad in the same way Pep would have looked at his when they're behind. I think Pep would always have firm belief that they could get him out. I'm not sure Jurgen looks at his squad like that anymore.
I agree. This is what I mean about all of the injuries.
Never
and
hear
stuff.
Pep criticising his team or standing there in disbelief that they can't produce the goods. And the other thing is with the recruitment is Michael Edwards still not really been replaced.
Julian Ward's
it'd be very interesting what Julian does in the transfer market, and if he's working hand in glove with the manager, he needs to, because their recruitment has never been a scattergun approach. It was always been very structured, and they go out and get what they need. Van Dijk and Alisson are a great
more
example.
in the negotiation, which is actually getting the players that they wanted. So the people who targeted the players and the people who would be part of that playing conversation are all still in place, but the negotiator has gone.
We can all see a good player, especially the players they're looking for. Everyone sees that. It's about getting them over the line. That's the hardest bit, and they've lost one of the best in the business at that.
Yeah, the difficulty is that there was lots of talk linking them with Jude Bellingham, and then suddenly the likes of, if Manchester City are interested, if Real Madrid and Liverpool can't compete with Liverpool aren't struggling financially, but they can't compete with nation-owned clubs and with a Real Madrid who have all that support despite their recent financial issues.
And on top of that, part of the problem is that Liverpool, when they got Alisson, they could afford to wait for him because the other clubs weren't where they are now, and so they were able to wait and they got him. When Van Dijk arrived, he arrived in the January, but in the preceding few months they were losing games they should have won, and lots of people were saying there must surely be a defender out there that can improve the side rather than waiting for Van Dijk. But they waited and he arrived and had a transformative effect on the team. I don't think they can afford to wait right now because Spurs are stronger, Arsenal are stronger, United are resurgent at the moment, Chelsea are stronger, so they can't afford to wait. But as you rightly say, Real Madrid, they've got Tchouaméni already. They're going to go for Bellingham, and if they go for Bellingham and add him to an already amazing team with Rodrigo and Vinicius Junior and so many others, if you're Bellingham, you've got really
that's why they have to finish inside the top four, because if they don't finish inside the top four, they've got no chance of getting the players like Bellingham and these players that they're linked with. So I think it's going to be a big window for in January, I think, after the World Cup, see what happens, and at the end of the season. But when you are competing with Manchester City, you can pretty much, the best team, one of the best teams on the planet, if not, and they can pretty much pick and choose whoever they wanted, and you've been level pegging for so long, and then you see them add Haaland, and you're thinking, right, we're just about hanging on to the top four.
But Darren, do you think that City, there is almost, they're such a good squad, if they come knocking for you, do you think to yourself, am I going to get a game?
But they do. City players do get a game, don't they? Because although it's a good squad, it's quite a tight squad.
Do they get a regular run of games, in so much as there are players at Liverpool and even Real Madrid who would say, I know I'm going to play every week. It's not necessarily the case.
I'll give you a good example of that.
Got 80% of them, though.
Yeah, Fabian Delph I had obviously at Villa. If he would have stayed with me, he would have played every minute of every game.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, so I spoke to him since and he's quite pleased that he went to Man City. He's got a few medals there now. So when he's got them grandchildren, he can show them the medal. Whereas at Villa, he might be showing them. He could have shown him his appearances. But
on the flip side, and you know, that does kind of knock the argument into a cocked hat, but did he play a lot for those medals?
He did. Well, he played. He knew he weren't going to go there and play every game, but he certainly played. In one season, he played like over 30 games at left back. You know, we know our left back is at Man City. It's a midfield player. He was perfect for it. But Pep just fitted him into the team when he needed to. And the rest of the time, he was restricted via injury. But he still played enough to get the medals. Yeah, and I think that he was pleased that he took that leap rather than play every game at a team that's not going to win it.
Well, they play so many games at that top level, don't they? Champions League. They always go deep into the League Cup, FA Cup, and the Premier League. Whoever they can get will get more than enough 30 plus games in whatever competitions. over a season.
So if you're Bellingham, you'd still go there rather than Liverpool or Real Madrid.
I don't think he goes to Real Madrid. I don't think he's able to go there. Not now. He can go next year, but at the moment, I don't think he's got the quota to be able to entertain him unless they get rid of one of their superstars.
Well, it would be next summer. So they'll
next in. Well, they've got to make way for him because at the moment they can't take Bellingham.
What I'm saying
would be our first choice. Real Madrid.
Oh, Real Madrid.
That's your first choice.
Real Madrid. Without doubt,
for sure.
And like Darren's saying, if they're out of the Champions League anyway, there's absolutely no chance of going to Liverpool.
It's always easier to talk about the sides that are struggling because there's always more conversations to be had about how things have gone wrong and how they fix them. So Nottingham Forest, though, do you think we're going to be looking at this as a bright spark in a difficult season, or are we going to be looking at this as something that's lifted them? You're quite categorically on.
Yeah. I think
it's just a bright spot.
I think it's a bright spot. What's their fans delighted to see. You know, they want to come to the Premier League. They knew it would be tough. It's going to go right down to the wire. I believe they get relegated. I really do. But it is a bright spark in a very disappointing season.
They were good though, and they did look like the Forest that we saw play against Premier League sides in the FA Cup last season. We saw more of that. Is it about the difficulty of sustaining that throughout a 38-game season?
I think so. Well, I talked about getting up, Liverpool getting up for the Man City game, Forest to get up for a home game against the City ground bouncing to get Liverpool there. That game down the years, it's been historic, brilliant occasions. For them to get up for that game is fine, but they need consistency now. They need to bounce on to the next one and try and put some back-to-back wins together to give themselves any chance, but I think they'll struggle. I really do.
I think in line with my appearance today, I thought that Emmanuel Dennis, the striker who scored goals for Watford last season, I thought he should have started. I saw the lineup, I thought, why is he not starting? And then the guy who started instead scored a winning goal. So.
Formerly of Liverpool, although he never made a senior appearance. It always is the way that players come back to haunt their former clubs. So Nottingham Forest looking for a little bit of consistency, but there are lots of teams down at the bottom who've had up and down seasons. For Aston Villa, it feels like a real low at the moment. We'll be talking about them and how they've managed to lift themselves from the pits of despair.
For sport.
Well, that was Steven Gerrard's face after the defeat that saw him sacked as Aston Villa manager, but I imagine it wasn't too different following Aston Villa's 4-0 win. They were 3-0 up within 14 minutes of that game. And Tim, as a manager, having left the club, the last thing you want to see is those players putting in a performance that you could have done with to help you save your job.
Yeah, he would have watched it in disbelief. I mean, it was chalk and cheese for the performance we saw at Fulham a few days earlier. Yes, there was a few changes made, but the desire, forget the tactics for now, the desire, the running around, the distance covered, I mean, it was just far and away improved. And once they get 2 early goals, 3 early goals. Danny Ings scores a brace as well, and the confidence is something you can't underestimate. They would have been very confident. It takes a brave player. Brent has been there as well as I have to go and play in that environment when it's not going too well. But it is a fantastic place to go when the crowd are on the up. It was toxic there for Stevie. They wanted him out the way, and they've got their wish, and the result is great. But you're absolutely right, Kels. The last thing you want to see is a performance like that and a result like that if you've just been relieved of your duties, because let's face it doesn't bode well on your
No, it doesn't reflect well on his time, and doesn't bode well for the future completely. But for the Villa fans, though, especially the ones who've been very loudly and angrily calling for his head, are they vindicated now?
I mean, it's one game, and you can't even say it's the new manager bounce because they haven't got one. So it's the new coach bounce, but it's one of them where I wouldn't say they're vindicated, but the performance that the boys put in against Brentford, surely they're asking the same question, the fans, where's this been all season? Because, as Tim was saying there, they ran around, they worked really hard, they scored good goals. I know when you get a goal early, games can change. But I guess it's just a fresh kind of ideas, fresh identity. The fans went there knowing Gerrard wasn't going to be there. To be fair, Stevie had a tough time while he was there. It's unfortunate, the results that he got, but it almost felt like a fresh start for everybody connected to the club, and the fans bought into that. And then when you go and give them an early goal as well, they were always going to go with the team then, and it didn't surprise me when it was 1, 2, 3, 4, because as Tim said, he's managed there. When them fans get behind you and you're doing well in that stadium, it's loud. You run the extra couple of yards. It's a completely different atmosphere in there. But again, the players have got to look at themselves, because you can't put that performance in midweek and get battered by Fulham, and then on the Saturday could turn into a completely different team. That shouldn't happen.
No, although we have talked about the fact that there's so many teams in the Premier League who are inconsistent. But what the Villa fans have been saying consistently is, our squad is better than our performances suggest. Dean Smith, who they had such a huge affection for, he had a much lower squad than this and did more with it. Is that fair criticism, do you think?
It is fair, but I think the problem with Villa is that they don't support their managers at the moment, because Dean Smith got them promoted. They threw him overboard at the first sign of trouble. They're doing the same with Steven Gerrard. He should have been given the time, the mandate to be able to regenerate that squad. He was very unlucky that he had Carlos, he signed from Sevilla, the central defender. He got injured very quickly.
Lost Michael Beale.
He lost Michael Beale, who went to Queen's Park Rangers to manage there. I think as far as you could say that he placed his faith in Coutinho, who didn't deliver at all. I think it was one goal in 22 matches for him. He wasn't influencing, he wasn't scoring. Okay, you could say that it was wrong to give the captaincy to John McGinn. Lots of people think he was a different player when he didn't have that captaincy. The handling of the Tyrone Mings situation as well. Yes, he made mistakes, but it's very, very early in his time there, and he should have been given the time to regenerate that squad, bring his own players in. I don't think that performance is anything to celebrate, because it suggests to me that the players down tools on him. They didn't want to play.
But unfortunately, well, I've been there. That's his job, to get the best out of the group, and if he can't do it and someone else has come in, we're talking like Benty says, we're talking about a caretaker manager who's coming to take the reins for a few weeks or up to the World Cup. For them to get a turnaround like that, I agree with you, it is frustrating for Stevie to do that, but one thing about Steven Gerrard is very honest. I think he's authentic. I really do. I really believe in what he says when he's in front of the camera, and I think he tried everything, and he's honest. And he will be very disappointed, but he, at the same time, knows what the game is all about. If you don't get results, you get sacked. That's management.
Do you think he went in there and maybe approached it? He went into Rangers and had an instant authority. He was working with respect to them, players who weren't of the calibre of the Premier League players he played with and against. And so he was able to assert his authority straight away, whereas he came to a Premier League club and tried to do things with an authoritarian approach, if you like, and it didn't work with Premier League players who didn't want to be treated.
Do you know what it is, I think when you're in Scotland, you've got there's one ambition, that's it. You have to finish above Celtic. That's it. And to be fair, you've got better players than 99% of the league other than Celtic. You come to the Premier League with Aston Villa, massive football club, but what is the ambition? Where do you finish? Because there's so many good teams that are in the Premier League that, he probably rode that confidence way from what he did at Rangers, which was fantastic. But when he got to Aston Villa, it was almost like a reality check, wasn't it? That you're at a big football club, but all of a sudden now, you're not at the top of the food chain, you're maybe mid-table. Like, your ambition is at top 10, top 8. And that's a completely different mindset to where he was at Rangers, which is, you better win the league. If you don't win the league, you failed. But Aston Villa Football Club, are they Europe? Are they top 10? Where are they? And I think he, in himself, probably struggled to think, well, where can I take this football club?
I just think, as far as he's concerned, and they're talking about Thomas Frank, they're talking about Pochettino, I would look at the length of time that each of the last few managers has been there and said, if I go there and I hit a difficult moment, are they going to support me? Or are they going to support the players? Because
is that different anywhere else, though? Is that different anywhere else, though?
I think it is. I think there are some clubs where you do get the okay, you could argue that Leicester couldn't afford to sack Brendan Rodgers, but if you look at Arsenal, there are multiple occasions last season where they could have sacked Mikel Arteta, and they stood by that guy. They stood by his decision over Aubameyang. They stood by him when he was breaking all sorts of unwanted records, and they allowed him to regenerate the side, get the underachievers out, get younger players in, spot other talents, and they backed him. Look where they are.
Did the fans get as toxic as they...
100% they did. Arteta out almost every other week. You support Arsenal. You don't have to flush you out. But the point being that the fans, higher profile club, higher calibre players, it was every week. I came on here and many times and we were sort of saying, look, how much further can he go? But they stuck with him. And the documentary, I wonder if every club should maybe do a documentary so that people can see how difficult it is behind the scenes for managers, and maybe the context of their success might be easier to understand, like it is at Arsenal.
Although one of the managers you just mentioned there, Brendan Rodgers, might disagree with the importance of doing a documentary, a behind-the-scenes documentary. Look, when we look at Aston Villa and the clubs that you've mentioned where they have had a manager where they've backed over a long period of time, it seems as though there's an overriding aim at the club. It feels as though they have a bigger picture in mind. Well, what do you think the bigger picture is at Aston Villa? When they go out to recruit their next manager, you can always tell when a club's well run if you can identify what kind of manager would be good for them next. But what would be good for Villa? What are they looking for?
What are they? What are Villa? They need to ask themselves that question. They want to be progressive every year, like every club, the idealistic way, play nice football, attractive, and entertain our fans, win. But you can't go there and say we want to be title contenders. We want to be in the top 4. We want to win a domestic trophy every year. Sure, they've got to put a run together, and they get very excited about that. I did that myself when I was there, and it keeps the wolves from the door a little bit, you know.
Local rivals.
No, any win is good, you know. And when you can go to a cup final, that's what they want to be, and they want to be entertained. But everyone does. So what is their manager? Are they looking for the short term or someone to take them on? Do they want a young one to take them forward, enthusiastic, or do they want a safe pair of hands? I mean, someone like Sean Dyche is out there. He's out there, but he's the man you would go and get if you want to stay in the league. Yeah. Because that's the job's what he's had before. Is he going to excite the Villa fans when he comes in the door? Probably not. But it not necessarily means that he's the wrong person to come in. For me, if they had any chance of getting Pochettino, he would be the man I would go and get. He wouldn't go in there thinking he's doing Tottenham a favour. He's not that type of man. If he took the job, he would go in there and buy into the project. That is a huge football club. Huge. And I think there is a project there to be done, and he's good at that. I think he'll be an ideal solution for me. But
he's done it before, hasn't he? He's done it at Southampton, but where he built Southampton. I know Aston Villa are in a better place than Southampton, but he'd get more resources at Aston Villa, so I thought it'd be perfect for Pochettino, because as you said there, where exactly are Aston Villa? Top 10, top 8? Where should they be? And for me right now, you'd have to say the way that they're playing, it's about staying in the division. And that seems quite harsh to say, but that's where they are right now. Yeah, but I just think as far as Pochettino is concerned, his calibre now, he's managed PSG. If you're going to go to another club, it's going to be a big club. It's not going to be a Villa. I mean, Villa's a club you take on the way up. I get what you're saying about the size of the club, but I think where he is now, he's looking at an elite level club. If you've managed Neymar and Messi and Mbappe, you're not going to manage Aston Villa after.
You might want to. It might be quite a nice break.
Well, it might be a relief. Yeah. I think in terms of the trajectory of your career, you want to be managing another similarly big club. And as you said, you know, I think he's too good a manager to be at a club that's fighting relegation. And I think when Aston Villa decide, as you rightly said, Kelly, who they want to be, then they can decide on what kind of calibre of player. But if you are a manager, an aspiring manager, you either have to have supreme faith in your ability or really confident they will stick through you when you have a difficult moment. Otherwise you'll be where Steven Gerrard is now.
The favourite is Unai Emery, and I suppose that the perception of him in Premier League terms is his time with Arsenal, but there is also the success in Europe with Sevilla, and there are also those kind of positives that come with his reputation in Europe is very different from his reputation, perhaps people who remember his time at Arsenal. Again, maybe he was a manager who needed
But again,
more
they're
time.
looking at him, they're looking at Ruben Amorim at Sporting, they're looking at all these guys had support in difficult moments. They had the chance to build a team. They had a culture that was supportive of the difficult moments they went through. That doesn't exist at Aston Villa, because everybody wants success now. They want it in the context of Wolves. They want it in the context of the other clubs that are punching above their weight. They see West Ham of last season doing well on a smaller budget, and they want to do what they do. Everybody in the Premier League's impatient because they see everyone else in a hurry and doing something. They want to do it. But these guys build teams, often in the case of Emery, with other people's rejects. But there are fans at Villa who would look at that and say, why are you buying him? He wasn't good enough for that club. Why are you bringing him here? And that's part of the problem with, I think they're right to cover an Unai Emery, but would he want to go there? Just like he didn't want to go to Newcastle, because he looked at the setup at the time. And the only thing about Unai Emery as well is that he followed Wenger. And that's what went against him. If he'd have been given more time, I think he probably would have succeeded, because he's a good manager. You don't win the Europa League, 4 times if you're not a good coach? But unfortunately, it was just timing. He followed Arsene Wenger, and fans just had enough. They didn't like the football they were watching, and then ultimately ended up hounding him out. But I think he's still a top coach.
Yeah, lots of big decisions ahead for Aston Villa. Going to be a busy week in Europe for the Premier League sides that are involved this time around. Monday night football, first of all, though, with West Ham taking on Bournemouth. As we said, it's been a very different season for West Ham than it was last time out. And then on to Champions League action. Chelsea are at Salzburg. Manchester City go to Dortmund, where they face the famous Yellow Wall. On Wednesday night, Liverpool are at Ajax. Tottenham at home to Sporting Lisbon. And then on Thursday, it's PSV against Arsenal in the early kick-off. Then Manchester United against Sheriff, and West Ham take on Silkeborg. So all of that before we get to another round of Premier League fixtures. We've been talking about how busy this season is, and that's going a long way to showing how unpredictable it has been. It's certainly been an unpredictable weekend so far, and there's another one to come probably next week. To Darren, Tim and Darren for standing in for Wrighty, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you all again very soon, and we'll be back again at the same time next week when we'll be reflecting on another weekend of Premier League action. For now though, bye bye.